How's everybody doing today? Welcome into the first episode of On the Wire with King of the Hill Sports. Today we will be looking at who's on the waiver wire for week one, who you should pick up, who you should ignore, and some interesting trends that happened throughout the week that might be something to look forward to moving on to week two. First things first, we survived the Guillotine League. We went 1-0 in all three of our other leagues. Things are looking up. Do we even really need to add anybody on the waiver wire this week? I do have David Njoku in one league who might be injured. Gotta look at tight end. Isaiah Likely is not available in that league. Who should we pick up? We will start with the tight ends. In my ESPN main league, Isaiah Likely is available. We know Isaiah Likely had a big week one, but is he worth adding? Will he replicate that on a weekly basis? Now, some interesting things to look at. That Isaiah Likely Mark Andrews split. Isaiah Likely is actually on the field for 66% of the snaps, and Mark Andrews is on the field for 74% of the snaps. So Mark Andrews is only on the field slightly more, but Isaiah Likely, he was the number one option in week one. So you have to add him. Isaiah Likely is the only must add of this bunch. Now, if that trend continues, which I believe it will, Mark Andrews will play more than Isaiah Likely, but I think they'll have a lot of two tight end sets going on all season long. It might stay 80% Mark Andrews on the field, 60% Isaiah Likely on the field. They're going to split snaps an awful lot. The Ravens have Zay Flowers, and after that, they have Rashad Bateman and Nelson Aguilar. Isaiah Likely and Mark Andrews are probably their next two best receiving options after Zay Flowers, and apparently Justice Hill, who if Justice Hill is available in your league, go ahead and add him because he's also going to eat up some targets because John Harbaugh said they aren't going to run the ball 30 times a game with Derrick Henry, so how often are they going to run the ball? Now, some interesting numbers to look at. Tucker Kraft of the Green Bay Packers played 96% of the Packer snaps in week one. Now, is he more of a blocker or a receiver? Let's take a look. He's only owned in 3.7% of leagues, and he had 2 catches for 37 yards on 3 targets. Now, tight ends in general had a bad first week of fantasy football. I think there's only 5 total tight ends who scored over 10 fantasy points in full point PPR, and 2 of them were Foster Moreau and Juwan Johnson on the Saints. So Tucker Kraft, purely based on the fact that he played 96% of the snaps in week one, could be a good option to look at. Seeing as Luke Musgrave got targeted twice and didn't catch a single ball in the first week of the season. Tucker Kraft could be the tight end one in Green Bay, simply based on volume and workload. Next, we're going to look at Colby Parkinson, who played 88% of the snaps for the Rams in that Sunday Night Football game and actually looked really good when he caught the ball. He had 5 targets, 4 catches for 47 yards. Colby Parkinson could be a good add. When he was in Seattle the last few years, he was mostly used for blocking, and last year he picked up his receiving just a little bit, but at least with Tyler Higbee out, Colby Parkinson is looking like a very good add for the Los Angeles Rams going forward for the next few weeks or so at least. Also, with Puka Nacua going down, Colby Parkinson's value probably even increases that much more, and also we'll look at Demarcus Robinson a little bit. Next, we're going to look at somebody who I've called out a couple times already on previous videos. My guy, Theo Johnson on the New York Giants. Now, he played 86% of the Giants' snaps in week one. Daniel Bellinger, who? I've been saying it the whole time. They like Theo Johnson. I think he could be a good tight end for that team. Unfortunately, we saw how Daniel Jones did. He looked bad. It's only up from here for the Giants, we hope. Theo got targeted 4 times. He only had 1 catch. The Giants looked terrible. The Giants didn't score a touchdown. They were the only team that not score a touchdown in week one, I'm pretty sure. It was embarrassing. The fact that he got targeted 4 times was good. Wan'Dale Robinson also got targeted a lot. If he's not added in your league, add him. But we are talking about tight ends still. Theo Johnson, a tight end to watch. Among tight ends, I would say Isaiah Likely is the only must-add of the group. After him, I would maybe look at Colby Parkinson second for sure, just based on Puka Nacua being out and how much he was on the field already, and he had 5 targets in the first week. Colby Parkinson's looking good, and then again, after that, maybe take a look at Cade Otton and Tucker Kraft as additional options if you need a tight end in week one. Next, we will take a very quick look at running backs because there's really not much to see. Do you want to add Miles Sanders? I know you don't want to add Miles Sanders. It's an ugly ad. He's really all that's out there. Among running backs, my top 3 players to add week one would be Miles Sanders, Go on down to Emmanuel Wilson. Simply, he's the number 2 in Green Bay. Emmanuel Wilson had a pretty good first game. He had 4 carries for 46 yards and 2 catches. Josh Jacobs, somebody has to back him up. Emmanuel Wilson looked good as the backup. Maybe he'll get even more than 6 touches next game. 6 touches isn't bad, though, for the first game of the season. And don't forget, I've mentioned it before, Cordarrelle Patterson. He had 4 carries, but that could always go up. I mean, Jaylen Warren wasn't used as much as we thought. He had a slight injury. Arthur Smith loves Cordarrelle Patterson. He followed him from the Falcons. He's going to keep using him. A real sleeper to keep your eye on. Just you wait. He's going to be there. Now here's where things get interesting. We're going to look at the wide receivers. First guy I want to look at, Alec Pierce on the Colts. Now last year, Alec Pierce played 90% of the snaps throughout the entire season. He had a lot of games where he played 100% of the snaps and played every game, but he still didn't do very great. Week 1 of this year, with the added weapons they had on offense, I thought he would get even fewer looks. But Alec Pierce, 3 catches for 125 and a touchdown. Of course, that came on one big play. He had 1 huge catch for a touchdown, but still 3 targets. One of them was a big one. It seemed like Anthony Richardson trusts him. He was out there for over 80% of the snaps. And also another thing to look at, the Colts were the only team who targeted the running back 0 times. Not only did Jonathan Taylor have 0 catches, they never threw him the ball once. They never targeted the running back a single time in that game. Only team in the league to do that. These wide receivers are going to keep getting balls. This could be a pretty high-powered offense. They might just let it fly and let Jonathan Taylor eat up the middle. The next thing you need to look at is injuries. Mentioned before with Colby Parkinson, but with Puka Nacua out, take a look at Tyler Johnson and Demarcus Robinson. Now, Demarcus Robinson is already owned in my league. He may already be owned in yours. This is why I want to do this. People are going to tell you to add Demarcus Robinson. He's probably already added in your league. He's probably already owned. But Tyler Johnson can be available. Once Puka went down, Tyler Johnson had 5 catches for 80 yards, 7 targets. They're going to pass. Those targets that would typically go to Puka, they got to go somewhere, and those are the 2 guys that you want. Now we're going to look at these 2 Denver wide receivers. Nobody wanted any of the Denver receivers. I don't think anybody just trusts Bo Nix. Devon Vele and Josh Reynolds. Josh Reynolds, good old reliable. He's really the number 2 there in Denver. I would say Vele is like a number 3. I think Marvin Mims is kind of getting knocked out of the rotation, seemingly. But Josh Reynolds looked good. Devon Vele had 8 catches for 40 yards. Now, of course, in full point PPR, that looks a lot better than half point. He's not going to be under my Yahoo league until he could prove he could, maybe score a touchdown, get some more yards. But a lot of dump downs like this, very valuable in full point PPR. Devon Vele was only on the field for 49% of the Broncos snaps, but he also had 24% of their targets. About a quarter of Bo Nix passes were going Vele's way, and he hardly played half the game. That's something I really like to see going forward, and that's why I like looking at snap counts. If he's playing 49% of the snaps and getting targeted that heavily in that little time on the field, imagine if he gets bumped up to 60%, 80%. Something to keep an eye on going forward, but a good trend, maybe somebody you want to add now before it happens sooner than later. Next guy we're going to look at, very top of the list here, Allen Lazard, 100% snap rate. Allen Lazard was on the field for the entire game on offense. He did not take 1 snap off. He had 2 touchdowns. Aaron Rodgers loves him. We all know that. With Aaron Rodgers back, Allen Lazard should eat. He's going to be the number 2 behind Garrett Wilson, apparently. I mean, until Mike Williams comes back. Mike Williams played 4 total snaps on offense. I don't think anybody expected Mike Williams to get that little play coming off his ACL, but until Mike Williams is back at full health, Allen Lazard looking like a very solid, even like flex option. Allen Lazard is the number 1 wide receiver you want to add this week. One final mention, Ray McLeod on the Falcons. He was very much like a Devon Vele. He was only on the field for about 50% of the snaps, but he had 7 targets. He had about like a 15% target percentage on that team. So while he's out there, Kirk Cousins was liking him. Darnell Mooney didn't have the best game. Ray McLeod, if he gets more time on the field, he can look a whole lot better moving forward. And finally, just a couple quick mentions at quarterback. You want to add Justin Fields. You want to add Baker Mayfield. But now, if you're streaming, I know he looked horrific in the first week of the regular season. But as mentioned, that Washington defense, that Washington secondary is terrible. Daniel Jones versus the Washington Commanders secondary. Which one's going to let up? Daniel Jones looked terrible. Washington secondary looked terrible. Who wins out in that battle? If you need to stream a quarterback, if you had Jordan Love and he's out this week, don't be afraid to start Daniel Jones. Be a little bit afraid to start Daniel Jones, but start Daniel Jones if you really need to stream a quarterback in week 2, which I hope you don't unless you had Jordan Love. Before we head out, we're going to take one quick look at the free agents in my Yahoo league. Yahoo and ESPN differ quite a bit. One's half-point PPR, one's full-point PPR. Ownership percentages are much different than on ESPN, especially in this Yahoo half-point PPR format. Demarcus Robinson, 7% owned. Greg Dortch, 5% owned. Darnell Mooney, 17%. Now, one final thing I want to point out in this Yahoo league is how many more running backs there are available. Alexander Mattison, I don't know how he's 5% rostered on Yahoo. It should be much higher than that. I guess everybody trusts Zamir White over here. Alexander Mattison had a huge game. He should be added. Tank Bigsby had like 12 carries for 70 yards, and Travis Etienne is the one who fumbled essentially to blow the game for the Jags. Tank Bigsby could be a big add. Justice Hill had a ton of targets for the Ravens. They were throwing the ball to Justice Hill. He was out there quite a bit. Bucky Irving also had like 11 touches for almost 80 yards for the Buccaneers. He was in quite a bit for Rashad White. That might be a little bit more split than we thought. All 4 of these guys should be added. Ray Davis, I don't know how he's available either as a handcuff for James White at the very least. There's a lot more options at the running back position on Yahoo, at least in my league, and a lot of other leagues based on all these roster percentages than there is on ESPN. That's who's on the wire. We are on our way to week 2. I hope everybody won their matchups in week 1. I hope everybody gets who they want on the waiver wire. It's just the start of the season. A lot more is going to happen. Here's to week 2. I'm Matt Mods. This is King of the Hill Sports, signing out.